Hey internet friends! Not too long ago, those who sought total and complete control over a society did so not on the basis of exemplifying exceptional character or extraordinary ability, but they operated under what was known as the divine right of kings, or the assertion that a king, viewed as a god in his own respect, was not subject to the will of his people, but only to be judged by God himself. These mighty men of old were successful in convincing others that God's mandate flowed through their veins, and that everyday people should spend the best years of their lives working to secure the social order of their realm. And for a time, this was how the world worked. Documented in history books with the blood of the ordinary used as the ink to write a version of the past. But in a post-American Revolution society, it would seem like the divine rights of kings would be a distant memory. But is the reality really so? Do certain bloodlines still hold power within our current government system? And if all US presidents are somehow united in blood, does that mean our leaders are really elected by the people? Or does that mean they're selected by the few? Recently, there's been a surge of renewed interest in a story that hit the mainstream a number of years ago, when Bridget, a 12-year-old student, discovered that all of the United States presidents, with the exception of one, were all related to each other, linked by one distinct royal descendant. Bridget reportedly completed this project with a little help from her grandparents, and the one president they were unable to link to the common descendant was Martin Van Buren, the 8th president of the United States, but the first president to actually be born a citizen of the United States, unlike the 7 presidents before him who were born British subjects. At 5'6", Van Buren's nickname was the Little Magician, because he was quite the compelling guy, or at least Yale's Skull and Bones Not-So-Secret Society must have thought so, as Van Buren's skull is rumored to reside within the school's tombs. Bridget traced all of the presidents back to King John of the House Plantagenet. The House of Plantagenet, with the surname having etymological roots in Old English, meaning sprig of bloom or young tree. According to the legend that's still being circulated today, the Plantagenets were descended from a demon, which served as an explanation of their ferocity and seemingly supernatural success on the battlefield. King John's reputation doesn't really improve from his familial lore. You were probably introduced to him as a child, as the villain in the tales of Robin Hood, as the ruler of a vast international empire who held the most important and powerful dominion over Europe at that time. There's next to nothing flattering written about King John. During the age of chivalry, he was callous and cruel, orchestrating one bloody betrayal after another, relishing in the conflict he created in his own court, starving his captives to death, and most of all, oppressing his subjects. One of the lovely fairy tales taught within the confines of the classroom assures us that the era of kings being able to do whatever they pleased, whenever they pleased, ended with King John, as he's most known for granting the Magna Carta, a document that was based on the Charter of Liberties and whipped up by the Archbishop of Canterbury as a practical solution to a political problem. You see, King John had managed to anoint everyone with his disastrous military campaigns. And he specifically ticked off his barons because he attempted to extort money from them. So as a peace treaty of sorts, the Magna Carta served to place limits on the power of the crown, theoretically ensuring King John's actions would not be repeated by a future ruler, and to this day still symbolizes the rights of a subject against the power of a tyrant, even though the document definitely didn't apply to all people at that time, just nobility. Sorry, poor people, you lose again. But nonetheless, it was the first step towards the justice system we know today. King John granted the Magna Carta in 1215, but by the next year, he had kicked the bucket, with his legacy being that he managed to lose the empire his family had attained. His funeral broke tradition as he wasn't buried with his crown, and records of his death indicate that he was little mourned, and mentioned that his subjects thought him to be suffering in the torments of hell. Even his queen abandoned 4 of their 5 children and wasted no time to start a new life with a lover from her past, never to publicly mention her late husband again. Pretty spicy, right? Curiously, in 1797, King John's body was exhumed and the townspeople pilfered parts of his remains, keeping them as souvenirs. Comment below if you would have kept a piece of King John as a souvenir. Your honesty, as always, is appreciated. Before a 7th grader connected all of the presidents back to King John, there was a guy making headlines in his attempt to discover if and how bloodlines played into power. As the son of a Washington, D.C. attorney, this Harvard graduate, classmate of Ted Kennedy and ex-husband of a French countess, Harold Brooks Baker often made comments about the British royal family to the press and advocated his most royal candidate theory with each United States presidential election, with the theory being that the winning candidate would always have the greatest percentage of royal blood. His theory held water up until the 2004 presidential election, when he guessed that John Kerry would be the winner, given that he had more royal blood than George W. Bush. Brooks Baker kicked the bucket a few months later, but his theory lived on. Much like Bridget's project, the media drooled all over themselves whenever Brooks Baker spoke. And the propagation of his most royal candidate theory has served to push another theory, that presidents are selected, not elected, and specifically their selection is based on their pedigree. To reiterate, the basis of this theory is that a candidate does not achieve presidency because of their ambition, charisma, skill set, or ability to get the most people to vote for them. The candidate ascends to presidency because they are selected by their bloodline. A bloodline that can be traced back to House of Plantagenet. Critics of the most royal candidate theory have claimed that the odds of any given person being distantly related to royalty are remarkably high, with one estimate suggesting that more than 150 million Americans are of royal descent. So there's quite a few of us who can trace our lineage back to royalty. One model uses a formula that was created from research at Yale and aimed to find Europe's most common ancestor. What they discovered is that if you took the entire population of Europe and plugged it into this formula, you'd have to go back around 1,300 years or 46 generations to find the generation that contains Europe's most common ancestor. And that ancestor would likely be someone of royal blood since that family tree has survived. Meaning that, with this model, everyone in Europe is descended from Charlemagne. It should be noted, though, that the House of Plantagenet is quite a bit more recent than the reign of Charlemagne. Furthermore, if it is true that an estimated 1/3 of Americans are said to be descended from the Plantagenets, you would think the number of American presidents who can trace their bloodline back to King John would actually be less than 98%, as Bridget's model suggests. But actually it's more than 98%, since Donald Trump is related to King John as well. And it was discovered after Bridget's media blitz that Martin Van Buren's ancestry can be traced back to King John's mother. So that puts us at 100% of United States presidents who are tied back to the House of Plantagenet, which is interesting for such a small sample size. That being said, I personally have a problem with the most royal candidate theory. Hello, this is my opinion. Both Bridget's project and the most royal candidate theory rely on something that most politicians don't have. Honesty. Honesty about who's your daddy and baby mamas throughout time. But beyond that, does the royal candidate theory and Bridget's extracurriculars have any meaningful significance in deciphering what is truly playing out on the world stage? In my opinion, while I find this topic to be endlessly fascinating and I could happily make 20 videos on this topic, the line of questioning feels a bit misdirected. If you really believe presidents are selected, not elected, then why aren't we discussing the bloodlines of those who are doing the selecting? Who are the people we aren't talking about? What are their motives? What is their belief system? Sure, the puppet is interesting, but how about who's pulling those strings? What do you think, internet friends? Are presidents selected or are they elected? As always, I look forward to your comments. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, and supporting my channel on Patreon. Bye! No one ever sees me.